Good afternoon, everybody. We have with us composer and pianist Brian Eads. Brian is a Mississippian. He's from Grenada. He went to Delta State as an undergraduate and began to focus more seriously on conducting as a career. And he first attended Florida State for his master's degree in conducting, and then more recently, he went to Indiana University for his doctoral studies. The church has played a large part in Brian's life. He served as both a music and youth minister in various churches as he's been around the country. He's become a valued accompanist in more recent years and a vocal coach, and frankly, could make a career doing that if he chose to do so. Most recently, Brian has begun to arrange and orchestrate music, and including selections for the Nashville Symphony recently and the Chicago Symphony. He now lives in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a great place to be doing that. Brian's brought 4 musical selections, which we'll share with you in the course of the hour. And we do invite you, before we go to Brian, I do want to say we invite you to type into the Zoom chat any questions you might have to ask him. We will go to those questions, as we always do, in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this hour. Depending on your platform, if you've not used chat, you're most likely to find that chat button down at the bottom of your screen. Just simply tap it and then you can type into the chat. So Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
It's great to see you here. We've spoken to all sorts of folks in the course of this season so far, but it always is a special thing to talk to our fellow Mississippians. Well, let's get to it. The only real place to start is the beginning. Being from Grenada, it occurred to me you had a childhood not unlike most of us. Briefly walk us through your family, your primary and secondary school years.
Sure.
And especially, as they affect or as they influence your life in music.
So I would say the earliest memory I have of music is, and I'm sure many of the patrons out there can relate to this. My great-grandparents were bluegrass musicians. They could not read a lick of music, but if it had a string on it, they could play it. And I remember very vividly, as a young child, we would all gather in the living room of my great-grandparents' home there in Grenada. And of course, when you're a 4, 5, 6-year-old kid, that whatever house you're in is huge. It seems like a mansion. And the times that I've driven by there now, it's like, oh, wow, we broke every fire code in the city and the county. So the entire family would just pack themselves into the living room. Mama would be in the kitchen, of course, serving and making sure everything is just right, and cooking biscuits and gravy and all that. And the family would just get together and bring their instruments and play bluegrass and gospel music in the living room. And I remember sitting at the feet of my Uncle Buster. He played the fiddle. And I didn't know that the name of the song that he was playing at the time was a popular tune called Orange Blossom Special. I didn't know the name of it. I just knew it as the Choo Choo Train song. And so to this day, I'm 42 years old. Whenever I see Uncle Buster, I look at him and it's like, Uncle Buster, can you still play the Choo Choo Train song? He goes, buddy, I can do it. So I just remember being there and hearing that music. And my mom noticed that I could hear the tunes and I could go over to the piano, the little upright piano, and I could plunk out the notes. I could hear a TV commercial or something on the radio, go over and I could plunk it out. I was like, oh, and I would match pitch. And she thought, well, maybe there's some talent there. So I started taking piano very early, at 8 years old. I could have started earlier, but the local piano teacher, her name is Weta Thomas. At the time, she didn't accept students under 8 years old. But when I started taking, and I really took to the piano and it obviously demonstrated some talent for it, Miss Thomas is like, man, I wish I had started him earlier. But I started when I was 8, and I continued taking piano lessons all the way through my master's, actually, at Florida State. So
when you went to college, was it for piano?
It was for piano. I always knew, and this would be a conversation later. I always knew, though, that I wanted to conduct. But I mean, and this is Kraft, part of our story of how you and I met. I didn't have any exposure at the time to classical music. I mean, sure, I'd heard of Beethoven and Mozart, but if you had said the name Mahler or Brahms, I wouldn't have known. I just knew that when I was in church and I would watch the gentleman who was leading the music as he would conduct, and then as he would lead the choir and the piano and organ would play, and sometimes they would bring in an orchestra, I was just mesmerized. I thought, whatever he's doing is what I want to do. I didn't know how to get there, though. And so my main instrument was piano, and that's what I went to Delta State for, is to get a performance degree in piano.
It's funny you mentioned not knowing orchestra music. I look back, I was able to drive, so it means I was 16, right, which means I was a junior in high school. And all I knew about classical music is that I had heard of, and this is going to be astonishing to admit in this public forum. At 16 or 17, all I knew was something about Beethoven's 9 symphonies. I didn't know any more than that. I suppose I had heard the Ode to Joy or Beethoven's Fifth, but I couldn't have identified it as Beethoven. Same. And I went, because I could drive, I drove to the music store, and I had saved up my money, and you could buy the Beethoven's 9 symphonies for $19 or $20, a big box. Right. And I bought George Zell's Cleveland Orchestra. Yeah. And I stacked up on my record player, 5 and 6 deep, as you would do, and just let them play, drop, play, drop, play. And I just, of course, that whole world opened up to me. So, you and I do share such common interests, and this door opened at such a late age when you consider it. Oh, yeah. And then your life has been like my life, is that it's been 20 years since that time, 25 years for you now, of just, it's like a kid in a toy shop. You're 30 years old, 40 years old, and you're still discovering orchestral music.
And yeah, exactly, to illustrate your point, I had, before going to Indiana University, I was somewhat familiar with opera. I mean, peripherally so, but I wasn't a connoisseur by any means. And then, as you know, and many of your patrons know, Indiana University, and the heartbeat of that university, the music program, is the opera program. And I discovered this art form, this genre called opera, and I thought, oh my gosh.
That's another lifetime. Well, look, go ahead.
And then and by that time I could, not only could I understand and appreciate music, but I also had an appreciation for musical architecture. And when you look at the scores of these operas, you certainly have an appreciation for a piano work or a solo work, but then the craftsmanship that it takes, it's just on a different level. It's
3 hours. It's 4 hours.
Yeah. And then when you realize that every note that Mozart wrote is absolutely perfect. It's perfect music.
Well, I was interrupting you a minute ago because I don't want much more time to go without at least getting the first performance. It's a quick performance, the first one, but we do want to at least introduce folks to seeing your work. And I should say that these videos are from a point of view that we as conductors know, but most folks don't. This is a point of view. We put the camera for us conductors so you can focus in on Brian as a conductor from the perspective that none of us see, which is the back of the orchestra, the viewpoint that the orchestra sees. So we can see the front of the conductor. That's what most of these videos are. And as a quick reminder, at the end of all these performances, we're going to invite you to unmute. You will be allowed to unmute at that point. We'll make that possible, and applaud if you wish. You don't have to, but if you'd like to. And then we'll take care at the end of that little bit of muting everybody again after the conversation. So we're going to turn now. Here now is the first performance we're going to show in the hour, it's quite brief, as I said. It's Brian conducting music by Richard Strauss. And I think this is a reading situation.
Yes. May I say a brief word about that?
Please do, set this up.
What's interesting about this is what you're going to hear. We had one run through of that piece. I just had an idea. You know what? Spring is here. It's beautiful outside. Hey, I'll buy pizza for everyone. Let's come and read Don Juan, and then we'll eat pizza.
So this is Don Juan.
Yeah.
2 minutes of it by Richard Strauss. This is no segue from that at all. We're going to get back to talking about your life as a conductor, but it's really kind of a nice way to say that your life is typical of someone who is just has such an amazing talent in so many areas. You want to do so much in your life, and side by side with your passion for classical music is the fact that you've been very active in your church all your life. And for as long as I've known you, you've continued to be involved in some way. And for a large part of your life, for a number of years, you were actually full-time doing youth and music ministry. Talk to us a little bit about that, the challenge about that particular, but also the challenge of trying to balance these two aspects among many in your life that you're just so passionate about.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, some of my earliest memories were hearing music at my great-grandparents' house. Similarly, my earliest memories were in church. I mean, as soon as I was old enough and we could get to church, I mean, that was our life. That was what we did. Wednesday, Sunday, when the doors were open. And so as I as a kid was developing subconsciously a musical language and being influenced by all these sounds and genres and styles, unbeknownst at the time, but now as I look back on it, that genre of church music was not only informative, but it was, I mean, kind of the building blocks of my understanding of music, harmonically, structure, form, all of that. And so I fell in love with the music. I mean, I really love the music, but also just, my faith has informed just kind of how I view the world and just personal times of meditation and communion. And I always knew that I wanted that to no matter where I went, no matter where music took me, I wanted that element of my life to remain a major part of my life. And so I just made it a goal that even when I went to college and grad school and the doctoral program, I just wanted to find a place where I could still serve the church locally as a pianist. Kraft mentioned there was 6 years I served full-time as a music and worship pastor at a church in Tupelo, Mississippi. And it's just that genre, that people, that denomination, that style, everything about that is just very near and dear to my heart. And even to this day, I was telling Kraft before we joined on the Zoom call. I mean, I'm playing for Brentwood Baptist Church this Sunday. It's the largest Baptist church in Nashville, and I play for them quite frequently. Which incidentally, just behind the scenes, a lot of the arrangers and orchestrators that I followed for years of that style of music, they all play and participate in the church service at Brentwood. And so I remember my first Sunday, I was at the piano, main keyboard, and I'm surrounded by all of these, in my mind at least, these legends. And it was very intimidating. I was like, what are y'all asking me to play the piano for when you've got, these people over here? But they've become close friends, and I've just been able to maintain a close connection to that part of my personal and spiritual journey and part of my life in a way that is still very meaningful for me.
Well, it occurs to me as I hear you say these things that in my own life, I'm fortunate enough to work in a field where I cannot separate my work, even on the stage of Floydmire Hall. I can't separate that life from my sacred life. Because of the field that we work in, the two are intrinsically joined. And I have a suspicion that often what you experienced on the spiritual side early in your life, doing this work specifically, you have already numerous times found it in the secular world, maybe even in the opera pit, or even in the pit at Les Mis, saying, oh, that's the same thing. That's the same power.
Actually, it's the same thing. It's all encompassing, and it has just informed that lens that I gained as a child and growing up. It's informed everything now. And to your point, what's very, very powerful about that, this is a much longer story. When I first got accepted into Indiana University, I turned down the offer. And I turned down the offer just because I initially turned down the offer. I just did not feel personally prepared in my personal life, my spiritual life, that sacred life, that, I don't think this is the right decision right now. And so I emailed the conducting professor to let him know, and I let him know the reasons that I was declining the offer. And he wrote back, I'll never forget it. He said, Brian, though you and I probably differ on spiritual beliefs and views, he said, I do believe that all music comes from a spiritual center. And because of that, I'm willing to extend the offer of admission to you for another year if you change your mind.
And several years passed before you took him up on it.
Exactly. Here are two individuals, perfectly, strangers from not only different religious backgrounds, different walks of life, different age group, everything, geographic locations, everything. But the one thing that united us was this agreement and realization and awareness that, man, all music comes from this ineffable spiritual center that binds and unites. And I think it's something that we all experience.
Well, Brian, we're headed into the Mahler Adagietto. What a great setup for that. But set the specific performance up. Would you? Who is it? What is this orchestra? When was this performance?
Sure. So at Indiana University, the student conductors were given what we called ad hoc orchestra performances, which were orchestra performances that the University School of Music granted the space and time for, I believe, 7 concerts in the fall and the spring. And instrumentalists and vocalists would put their name in a lottery, and whoever got chosen, we would program the concert around the piece that they wanted to perform. Well, I got assigned this concert, and it was 2 soloists who wanted to perform the Mahler Kindertotenlieder. And so I paired that song cycle with the Mahler Adagietto. And so the performance that you're going to see, this is a student orchestra. These are all friends of mine. We had 2 rehearsals on this music, And what you see is just a weekend's worth of rehearsals of putting this music together. And I think the quality is quite high.
So here we go. Brooks going to give it to us. This is what is actually the fourth movement of Mahler's Fifth Symphony, known as the Adagietto. an awkward ending there. We have to choose some place to cut off a 10-minute movement. But just wonderful music making, Brian, and great to see you. That particular camera angle gets us a little closer, which is just wonderful to see your work from that point of view. I do want to touch on one more important aspect of your life, especially these days, and that is during your years at IU, which has been, in the last 7, 8 years, you've really become a prized accompanist there at Indiana University, or you're back at IU, in the studios and in your opera coaching. And of course, no small part of your work as music director of Les Mis is at the keyboard working with singers.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about what it means to be first an accompanist and also more specifically as a vocal coach.
Sure. When I look back and I think about of all the instruments that I could have learned, I'm so glad. And don't get me wrong, I would love to play any instrument. I love every instrument, but I'm so glad it was the piano, because it actually has afforded me opportunities and has opened doors to other areas. For example, opera and vocal coaching and accompanying. And to be honest with you, it put bread on the table for a long time of playing piano. I cannot tell you how many times I ran from voice lesson to voice lesson to voice lesson, playing here and there, to not only to make ends meet, but also I very much enjoyed it. But it just opened up my vocabulary and my knowledge base when I get to sit and play for a voice lesson for Carol Van Ness. Carol Van Ness, great opera star at the Metropolitan Opera. When Pavarotti retired and sung his last Tosca, he requested Carol Van Ness to sing it with him. I mean, encyclopedic knowledge of how this repertoire goes. And I get to go in and sit and watch her coach another student. Sylvie McNair, Costanza Cucaro. I mean, all these people that it was a masterclass. Every voice lesson was just a masterclass. And so I felt that because of my piano skills, that not only am I able to accompany, let's say, a clarinetist, trombone, an instrumental chamber group, but also I was beginning to accompany for voice lessons. Actually, the majority of my accompanying came to where I was really primarily accompanying voice students, and because of that, I was able to work my way into the opera program, and then I started playing all these opera rehearsals, and then eventually the ballet department called and, hey, can you play ballet for us? I couldn't at the time, but it just afforded me open doors into other areas of music. One of those being, Kraft and I saw each other a summer in New York because I was playing for an international vocal arts workshop. I think it was like for 4 weeks with Joan Dordeman, who was the opera coach at the Met. And had it not been, if I had played the greatest respect to every instrument, but if I had played xylophone, I probably wouldn't have been playing master classes for Joan Dordeman. And so I'm grateful that it was the piano, and also as an arranger and composer, even though there are plenty of arrangers, composers, orchestrators, Kraft, clarinet, right? It has also given me just the ability to sit down and look at a full score, and really flesh that out at the piano. And as I study a score, I can sit down at the piano and really just feel in a very visceral way. I can feel how this music is put together. So that's
without putting too fine a point on it, especially when I was with you that summer in New York and you were doing the work that you were at the Met a little bit of the time, as I remember, doors are opening up, or doors are open for you. And if you wanted to make an entire career as a vocal coach and spending a life in the opera world, you certainly could. There's just so many, your life is just full of so so much. Look, I'm going to stop us right there because I do want to get this very brief performance in. This is, again, just an excerpt, but we want to share with you Brian's work in a variety of repertoire. This is music by Wagner. Again, a very brief excerpt from Siegfried's Rhine Journey from Götterdämmerung. Yeah, and some bits there of music by Richard Wagner,
Yes.
Siegfried's Rhine Journey, and we did make that brief because we have one really wonderful performance coming up, which is the final 4 minutes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which we want to share with everyone, and we're going to get there in just a minute because it's time to get to questions that people have been thinking up as we've talked. But I do want to try to close this conversation somehow. And it seems to me the way to do it is to say that it's throughout your life you've had, as we were talking about, just so many things you've enjoyed doing, and that you're so magnificent at. You have talents in every area: composing, arranging, accompanying, opera, the pops world, the Nashville world, and of course classical music. These days, most surely, you're now in your early 40s, headed to your mid 40s. You must by now beginning to have a sense of a short list of things you really want to do now with your life, with your career. You've got 30 years plus to go in your career, we hope. What would that, and if nothing else, maybe over the next 10 years, what would that short list be? Talk to us a little bit about trying to focus in on your passions here.
I of course certainly conducted a Broadway tour. I would love to conduct in a Broadway house. I would love to conduct a Broadway show. I love pops genres as well. And so I'm hoping, I would love to get on the pop circuit. I would love to at some point hold a music director position and invest that way in the community. And as far as arranging and orchestrating, to be honest with you, I want to do some more just pure music for myself. I mean, I'm arranging for other people, an existing song. I'd like to do something just programmatic for me. I've got an overture in mind. I mean, I remember, Kraft, that you were writing when we saw each other in New York those years ago. Weren't you writing?
Yeah, I was, and I was 50 before, because I did a tremendous amount of arranging, orchestrating, and made a good life at it. before my years in Mississippi, and I was 50 before between you in this conversation, that I really, frankly, had anything to say.
Right.
That I really felt like I had something to add to the conversation that someone greater has not said. But I still feel that way. And 12 years down the road, I am composing because I do feel like I have something unique to my life to say.
Right. I feel
good to hear that you do, that you have that. Yeah.
Similarly, in the area of academia, at some point I would love to teach at a university, but I only want to do so after significant and cumulative years in the professional world, so that I feel like I do have something to say and to contribute. Well,
you just gave us 2 lifetimes of work for the next 30 years. We all look forward to seeing, you and I do, because you and I have known each other for 20 years. I look forward to seeing what roads open up in the next 10 years, next 20 years for you. We are going to pass you off to Brooke after this next selection. I'm going to close up my portion by introducing now the final performance of the hour. We are going to return now to give you the proper angle. This is a traditional viewpoint from the audience. There's really no other way to experience this performance of the final 4 minutes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Well, thank you, Brian. You certainly gave us some wonderful music and some wonderfully big music tonight. And it has been a real joy to listen to your performances and watch the way you really dance with this music. I've enjoyed watching your conducting tonight. Going back to the first piece, Don Juan, the Strauss, what orchestra were you conducting there?
Sure. So that was honestly just a gathering of some of my friends and colleagues who volunteered their time completely out of goodwill, their love for music. And honestly, and I was very touched, their friendship for me and with me. And it was, I think, the week before finals one spring, and people had mentioned wanting to get together to do something like that. And so I asked the players, I booked the hall, I bought pizza for everyone, and we came in and we had one rehearsal on it. And then the take that you saw is the take right after the run through. I mean, we didn't even rehearse it. I mean, sure, a couple of places here and there, but it was just read through it. And you know, what's funny and interesting about that piece, as many of your patrons will know if some of the orchestra members are tuning in, for the string players, I mean, that is a standard orchestral excerpt. They can play the first page in their sleep with their eyes closed, you know. But it was funny, we all knew when we got to the second page of the music, because everyone turned the second page and the string players went because everyone knows the first page. And you know, if people play it, you know, play the entire piece for sure, but the first page, oh my gosh, the string player, they had it from memory. I didn't have to do a thing, just boom, and they were off, you know. But we turned to that second page and you could just hear the shuffling of feet a little bit, you know.
Oh, goodness. Well, we had a couple of different audience members ask about who you were conducting there, so we wanted to get that in. This one's a little harder. What would be your elevator speech in trying to convince somebody to come to the orchestra or the opera?
Oh wow. I would say I would take my experience as a young kid as a story, because I remember going to a symphony orchestra performance. I didn't have much exposure, if any, to opera, but I do remember going to see, of all things, one of the first music theater pieces I ever saw was Les Miserables. And I remember being in the nosebleed section of the theater and looking down into the pit. I could have cared less what was going on stage, but looking into the pit and watching the conductor and thinking, whatever he's doing is what I want to do. And I've seen the musical several times since then, and not just when I've conducted it, before then. And I was the kid that was watching, hoping beyond hope that somehow I would get to do this, and now I get to do it. And it may sound a little, you know, pie in the sky to say, you know, your dreams can come true, but that's a hope, that's a belief that I have, you know, that yeah, you can, whatever it is you dream to do and is your passion, I just believe that it can and will happen. So now I think I'll never know who that 8-year-old kid that's me that's sitting out there. Every performance, I bear that in mind. There is a me as a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old that's sitting out there, who 20, 30 years from now, hopefully, will be able to tell his or her story of how that concert changed their life and influenced them to do what they do.
I absolutely believe that is true. And one of the most inspiring things for me and my work with our orchestra is when we have education concerts and we're busing all of these kids in and they're taking in the chandelier in the hall for the first time. And then from that very first note, they're just so engaged, and Kraft does such a wonderful job with the kids, but you know, it's very impactful. So absolutely, there's somebody at every performance
Every performance.
being inspired by what you're doing.
And I remember, of course, having conducted, I think, over 850 performances of Les Mis, certainly I wasn't, not every performance was I thinking, oh, it's such a joy to do this. I'm so happy to be here right now. Inevitably, however, when I did feel that way or was tempted to feel that way, I mean, quite honestly, I did at times. I remember a performance where I was just not feeling my best and just thinking, oh, I don't want to be here. I wish there was a hurry up and end. And I remember right at the prologue, the very end, for whatever reason, I turned to my right and I saw an elderly couple that was sitting in the front row after years of marriage. And all of a sudden the husband just took his hand and he moved it over and grabbed the wife's hand. And they held hands to the very end. And I thought, that's why I do what I do. Right there. That moment kept me going.
What a positive outlook you have there. I can't imagine how conducting the same thing 850 times would ever get monotonous, but at least you have a good piece to conduct there. Well, Michael asked about the Mahler piece, and he says that it's one of the most emotional pieces in existence for him, and we suspect that you feel similarly. And can you talk about why is that piece so special for you?
Well, I think it's special for me because and certainly scholars would disagree and have disagreed quite a lot about Mahler's spirituality and his conversion to Christianity. Or some think it was believed to be authentic. He was Jewish, and there was a conversion experience. Some people think that maybe it was just because it was. I hate to say it, but it was a bit opportunistic because he needed certain positions in order to get his music out. However, regardless of whether it was legit or not, there is throughout Mahler's lifetime, there's certainly he is passionately moved by religious text, by moments of spiritual inspiration. In fact, I think one of the most watershed moments for him, for Mahler, was not his baptism, conversion to Christianity. It was a number of years prior at the funeral of Hans von Bülow, where he really experienced, according to his words, spiritual illumination. And I saw Michael's question, and so I pulled up a quote by Mahler. As he described the moment in a letter written only a week before his baptism, Mahler says of the Symphony No. 2 of the Resurrection, "It flashed on me like lightning, and everything became clear in my mind. It was the flash that all creative artists wait for, conceiving by the Holy Ghost." And for me, knowing Mahler's appreciation, his inspiration from whatever spiritual source that he was experiencing at the time, that inspiration is nonetheless there. And so it's something that I pick up on and that I appreciate and I connect with. And I think one can just feel it and hear it. And I know there's no quantitative way to necessarily analyze that, but anyone who's ever played Mahler or listened to Mahler, there is something non-human that goes beyond human understanding. It's transcendent. I don't know what that is, but I do know that that is there. And so that is why I connect with that particular piece in general.
I think transcendent is the word there for
Sure.
many big musical experiences.
Yeah. It's not conjecture. It's not denying. There is a divine genesis with this music. I remember I was in Los Angeles, and I got to observe a rehearsal of Mahler 8 with the Los Angeles Phil. Gustavo Dudamel was conducting. And I just sat there weeping. It was like, how did a human conceive of this? I just do not understand. It had to be, it just has to be something beyond our comprehension and understanding, a gift from the divine. So that's my conviction.
Well, music certainly has the power to lift us all up. So, and then just one last tiny question, I believe. The last piece that we showed, the Beethoven, what was the venue that you recorded in there?
So that is a performance venue at Indiana University called Our Hall, AEUR. And of course, we had no shortage of puns. It was like, hey, what hour are we meeting at? Our Hall. But it's just a beautiful, I would say it's about 10 or 15 years old, beautiful space. The pipe organ in there is glorious. All of those people on that stage, all students, all volunteer, no one got paid. They wanted to do it because of their love for music and their conviction that this music just needs to be performed, and they wanted to be a part of it.
That's certainly, I spent a number of years living in Bloomington, and it's a very special part of living in town that you can access such high quality music at pretty much any time. So, and then somebody just posted, do you play the organ?
I do. Sure do. I grew up playing for many a church service at the organ. My first organ, the first organ I played on was a little bitty Hammond B3 organ. Yeah.
Okay, well, we have just a couple of minutes, and if anybody has a question and would like to unmute, I would suggest we not all unmute at once. But if anybody has a question for Brian, we'd like you to jump in and ask.
Brian, if I may, I'm in Eads from
Jay,
Indiana.
How do we have the same last name?
It is not that common. So I just was very excited about getting to participate in the Zoom here. And I think offline, you got any genealogy information?
I know, right? Are you related to the Eads that built the Eads Bridge in St. Louis?
I claim him.
Okay, so do I. So we'll just go with you and I are related. How about that?
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
We're
all
close.
right, all right.
Good enough.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you
I have a
spoke up.
question.
I saw you and I thought, oh, you must just be family that joined the Zoom here. How fun.
That's right. That's right. Well, good. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Did I see a sweet lady by the name of Melanie Marshall on here earlier?
You did see Melanie.
Melanie Marshall, that's her maiden name.
Yes, and Duke was here a second ago too. Has he run off?
Best choir conductor ever.
How are you doing? Oh my gosh.
How are you?
So this comes full circle. Everyone that's watching, Kraft's question to me earlier about how do you balance church and classical music. So Melanie's father and I served at the same church in Tallahassee, Florida, Celebration Baptist Church. And that's where I first met Melanie. How about that?
I know, I was in choir. So I got to experience your conducting.
That's right.
Week, which was great.
You have not aged a bit. What is your secret?
You're very kind.
No, I'm truth telling. They say in the Baptist church, I'm truth telling.
No, I remember every choir practice was always so much fun, and you made such a difference in the church and for everyone in choir, and everyone just thought the absolute world of you. And so you definitely make a huge impact in the churches that you're in. So that was a great treat for me to get to be part of the choir while you were there.
Well, thank you. Very, very sweet. Very kind of you.
Sure. It's great to see you again too.
Great to see you too. I thought I saw your smile. I was like, that's Melanie Marshall.
Betty and Pam, I think you both had a question. Did either of you want to?
Well, I had. Oh, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Pam from the San Francisco Bay Area.
Hi, Pam.
Hi. I have grandchildren, and how would I, with Zoom, I don't think they would have the same appreciation for the music. Are there any pieces that you would suggest to introduce them to
To your grandchildren?
Yes.
How old are they?
Oh, they range from, I'd rather not say, they're young,
I tell you what, we'll go with
young adults and teenagers.
Okay. Do you know of their current musical interests? What genre?
Well, they like the opera.
They
so
like, they love
expose them to opera, but
anything Puccini.
Puccini, okay.
Anything.
Okay.
I would say go and Tosca is absolutely one of my favorites, but Madame Butterfly, of course, Turandot is amazing. I've recently been on this kick of watching old Pavarotti videos, YouTube videos.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
absolutely, very nice to meet you.
You too.
Okay, well, we thank everybody for coming tonight. This has been a real delight, and I always leave so uplifted. Betty,
Sorry to interrupt, but
please
since
do.
we're about to sign off, I wanted to get my question in. And it's, are there any videos, anything we can access on the internet when you're playing the organ?
I don't have any currently. I could probably make some though. Would that be of any interest to you?
great.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I tell you what, I will stay in touch with Kraft, and I'll see if I can find a space here in Nashville and maybe record some organ stuff for you.
All
That
right,
would
if you
be
do that, we'll definitely put
fabulous.
the link on our Facebook page and get it out there.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Betty.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. You've been delightful tonight, and we're gonna sign off here. So happy hour cheers to each of you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.